Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. I have had a number of people asking me, and this I've answered it before, but I think it's worth going over it again. What is the point? What can be achieved by the opposition boycotting the elections? Particularly if Zanu PF is going to claim all the seats or share them with the smaller opposition who participate? Well, the answer to that one is actually very simple. The opposition will not boycott the elections because of greed. Zanu PF knows it. People must understand that the Zanu PF of 1980 to 2008, that's before the global political agreement, is a totally different animal from the Zanu PF of 2008 and beyond. Zanu PF has learned a great deal from the GNU. And that is something that some people are failing to understand. And you need to understand that for you to proceed. But to come back to the question again, what is the point of the opposition and the members of the public boycotting the elections? What's there to be gained? Well, the short answer to that is, if you know the process is flawed, so flawed that getting 73% of the vote is not good enough to win, and you also know that by participating, you're only giving the vote rigging Zanu PF legitimacy, then surely the rational option is not to participate. If Zanu PF is going to get into power without your participation, or with your participation, at least let them get into power without your participation. Why are you giving them the blessing of rigging the election, of cheating you? That is the rational thing to do. But the long answer to this question really entails having to explain why the opposition would not do the rational thing and boycott the elections. They know that Zanu PF is offering bribes of gravy train seats to entice them to participate. The party knows the opposition have found the bribes irresistible in the past, and they've got good reason to believe this has not changed. And hence lies our problem. Let me clarify a point here. When we say we want the opposition should boycott the elections, it does not have to be all the opposition boycotting the elections. You can never achieve that. Yes, if, for instance, Triple C was to boycott the election, Monsora and Matuku will participate and they would win the few seats. But the point there is, if a significant number of the opposition do boycott the elections, in this case here, if we're looking at Triple C, they got about 43% last in the 2018 elections. And the opposition, the rest of the opposition got as little as 4%. Surely everyone can see that the main opposition has boycotted the elections. The most important thing is to go back to the 2008 elections. These were a watershed election in that they showed Zanu PF's carte blanche powers to rig elections. But also, it showed that the party could no longer get away with it. Because both the AU and SADC refused to recognize Zanu PF at the end of the 2008 elections. And it was that refusal to recognize Zanu PF that forced Zanu PF to sign the 2008 Global Political Agreement. And that forced the party to accept the need to implement the raft of democratic reforms designed to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And it was that agreement that also gave birth to the government of national unity. Zanu PF wanted to form a government in its own right at the end of 2008. But because SADC and the AU refused to recognize them as the legitimate winner, because the election process was so flawed, they were forced to go into this government of national unity. Anyone who doesn't realize that Zanu PF, Robert Mugabe, did not want the GNU doesn't understand the politics. What Robert Mugabe managed to do during the GNU 2008 to 2013 is he bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends with the trappings of high office, very generous salaries and allowances, ministerial limos, a US 4 million mansion for Tsvangirai himself, etc., etc. And to show their appreciation, the MDC leaders threw the reforms out of the window. Mazuvano MDC adzidza kudya nyerere, meaning MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the gravy train, good life. They will never rock the boat. Boasted the Zanu PF cronies when they were asked why MDC leaders were not implementing the reforms during the GNU. That was the reason why MDC failed to implement even one meaningful reform. Corruption, greed. Yes, Zanu PF emerged out of the 2008 to 2013 GNU with all its dictatorial powers attached, thanks to the MDC leaders being corrupt and breathtakingly incompetent. And still, Robert Mugabe and Zanu PF were careful enough to exercise their dictatorial powers carefully. This time, instead of having a de facto one-party state, they accepted a multi-party system. They retained their dictatorial powers and were hiding that dictatorial powers behind a facade that Zimbabwe was now a multi-party democracy. A small price to pay. The party has been very careful to avoid giving SADC another excuse to deny them the legitimacy. That was the reason why they changed the facade. When Mnangagwa took over from Mugabe following the 2017 military coup, he too has maintained the multi-party democracy image by calling his administration a second republic, a new democratic dispensation. And he promised, although he failed to deliver, of course, the 2018 elections will be free, fair, and credible. And in fact, on that point, he has maintained that the 2018 elections were free, fair, and credible. But to make sure that the opposition continued to participate, to keep up this image that Zimbabwe is a multi-party democracy, Mnangagwa has increased the benefits of those few who get onto the gravy train. Late last year, he suddenly awarded MPs a 40,000 US dollar housing loan. Everybody knows that the sitting MPs who are going to lose their job as we go into the next election in a few months' time will never repay that. Even Chamisa could not deny that was a bribe. That is the bribe that he's counting on to make sure that they keep on participating. He has even extended his generosity by creating the Pollard scheme for those who lose in the election, rewarding the likes of Lovemo Maduku with cars. And I don't know whether that has since been granted. Some of the Pollard leaders had been asking for diplomatic passports. Who knows? Maybe it has been granted as well. After the humbling experience of being forced into the GNU in 2008, Zanu PF used its cunning to retain the dictatorial powers. They exercised them behind the multi-party facade. This is the iron fist in a velvet glove. Zanu PF is blatantly rigging these elections, including these 2023 elections, by failing to produce a verified voters roll. It has denied 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote. They constitute something like 37% of eligible voters. It has been using wanton violence to frog march rural voters to vote for the party, etc., etc. The iron fist. These are all examples of the iron fist. But the party knows that it can get away with all these things as long as it can get the opposition to participate in these elections regardless. That's where the velvet glove comes in. If the opposition, it doesn't have to be all of them, a significant number of them, were to stand up now and say, no, we are not participating in these elections. There are no verified voters roll, etc., etc. that will effectively expose the iron fist. SADC leaders, to be fair to them, they are the ones who in 2013 were asking the 2013 elections to be postponed until reforms were implemented, because they also are aware of the iron fist. They know that Zanu PF is rigging these elections. But as long as the opposition is prepared to uh, uh, participate, give them the excuse to grant Zanu PF legitimacy. So if a significant number of the opposition were to boycott these elections and give the reasons why they're boycotting them, SADC leaders will find it impossible to pretend that they don't know that these elections cannot be free, fair, and credible without something as basic as a verified voters roll. So Zanu PF is banking on the greed of the opposition to hide its iron fist in the velvet glove. The challenge here is not what happens if the opposition boycotted the elections. We already know the answer to that. Zanu PF will be forced out of office, as happened in 2008. This time, they may not even be asked to be involved in the GNU. The real challenge here is getting the corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless opposition to boycott the elections. They know they are flawed. They are not going to give up their 30 pieces of silver that Zanu PF is dangling in their faces. That is the challenge. That is why we are where we are right now, stuck with an opposition that will keep on participating in these flawed elections. The only option for us is to hammer in that argument that the opposition is corrupt and has lost political credibility. And therefore, then a discredited opposition cannot give legitimacy to Zanu PF. The process itself is flawed. How can you have an election without a verified voters roll when 37% of those eligible to vote are denied the vote, etc., etc.? That is our argument. I hope that clarifies that point. And thank you very much and good night.